Okay, so in this video I'm going to give you lots of tips about how to start a lesson, how to set up a lesson, and how to get a good beginning of your class. Okay, so here are some tips for starting a lesson. I'm going to give you a few tips first, and then we're going to go through and look at some examples as well. So here are my first tips. First, ask about things that students know and can answer. Okay, so your questions at the beginning, it's really good to ask questions, but your questions at the beginning should be easy. They should be easy to answer. They should be things that the students are prepared and ready to answer very easily, okay? So don't ask about things that students don't know, and don't ask difficult questions that are going to, make students nervous about answering. Okay, you want to start the lesson with lots of communication, some good questions, but keep them easy, and students will be able to answer them no problems. Next question, start with easy questions to get the class talking. Okay, so as I mentioned, get the class talking quickly. I suggest when you start a lesson, try not to talk for more than 1 or 2 minutes, okay? Something I've noticed is if I have a lesson and at the beginning, if I'm talking for more than 5 minutes, I'm kind of losing the students. Their attention is starting to go elsewhere. They're not involved in the class. So get the class talking as quickly as possible. Best thing you can do is kind of, say hello, a couple of things, and then throw them a question, get them into groups discussing as quickly as possible. Okay, next tip, start with something interesting, okay? Think about your topic, think about your language, think about whatever materials you're using for the class, and then try to link it with something interesting that grabs their attention, that gets them interesting, okay? Could be a guessing game, or it could be a picture for them to discuss, or it could be something about their lives, but something interesting. Okay, final tip on this slide. Use actions for young learners especially. Use multimedia, things like videos, YouTube videos and things like that, animations, moving GIFs and things. Use realia, very good for young learners, but also good for adults as well, real objects. Use pictures, visual things, and use videos to get attention, okay? So try and make the first few minutes of your lesson interesting, exciting, and interactive for the students. Okay, let's look at some more tips then. Okay, so next tip, use cartoon characters. Obviously this is for young learners, but for young learners, if you start a lesson and quickly show some cartoon characters, something that they like, straight away they're going to be interesting, they're going to be excited to hear about what you have to say or the examples you're going to be giving. And you can use cartoon characters to kind of secretly introduce some of the language of the lesson. So I've got 2 examples here. You've got Spider-Man and Hello Kitty, or Kitty I think it's called in Korea. So have a look at Spider-Man, and there's a question here. What is he doing? He's climbing. So that's an example of the target language. Now, you could use superheroes for actions. I think superheroes and actions fit together really well. You've got things like jumping, flying, hitting, running, things like this. So superheroes plus action verbs, that's a good link. And you could use Marvel and, all the kind of famous superhero movie characters that are popular at the moment. On the other side, we've got Kitty. And we've got some example target language here. What does she like? She likes fish. Okay, so there's an example of the target language. You might have a few different characters that like different things, and you might talk about what things they like. Okay, so you might have Pororo, Kokomang, some fun characters, and link each character with something that they like. Okay, and then you could start using this target language to introduce the expressions in the lesson. Okay, so use cartoon characters. Next tip for a little bit older learners, use celebrities. Very good with middle school and high school. Often that age, they're a little bit stressed about studying. They feel like studying is all about tests and things like that. So, try to make it fun from their perspective. Find out what kind of celebrities they're interested in. Are they into K-pop? Are they into movies and movie characters? So you can use famous K-pop stars. You can use famous pop stars and so on. Uh, a little tip about this: think about your language, think about your topic, and then try to find matching celebrities that kind of link well with your topic and your target language. That could be about clothes, or it could be about hobbies, jobs, whatever. Okay, so use celebrities. Next tip, use TV shows and movies. Okay, so you might have an example of a TV show or a movie, and that kind of becomes the hook to grab your students' attention, to get them into the lesson. And again, that allows you to model and demonstrate and give some target language examples. So I've got some examples here, a couple of dramas, some Korean dramas. Again, think carefully about what is your topic and your target language, and choose the TV show that matches well with your topic. Okay, got Harry Potter and Mr. Bean. Okay, you might be using the characters, or you might be using a clip from the TV show that allows you to warm up the topic and introduce the language. Okay, so use TV shows and movies. Next tip. For older learners, then you probably don't want to use, fun celebrities and cartoons and things for adults. Okay, so for adults, for older learners, use their lives and experiences. Think about things that they've done, things like travel, things like hobbies, places they've been, family, thing like that. So think about kind of easy warm-up questions related to, where did they go on the weekend, their favourite trip, how many brothers and sisters do they have, do they know anybody who has an interesting hobby, did they eat some nice food recently. So for older learners, it is really important that you use their lives and their experiences. It's quite different from teaching young learners who don't have, rich experience of life that you can use in your teaching. Okay, so think about using lives and experiences. Okay, some more tips about starting a lesson. Set the context. This is really important concept for teaching. So set the context of the lesson at the beginning. Contextualize the lesson. This means provide a context for the topic and the language. Okay, I've put some easy examples here. Number one, the example target language: I have a headache, I have a stomach ache, I have a toothache. So it's kind of, illness and sickness target language. Now, the context of this is a hospital or a doctor. Okay, so that is part of the context. So you might use that idea about doctor and hospital at the beginning of the lesson to set up the context. You might have some realia, like a stethoscope that makes you look like a doctor. Okay, so that could be a way of setting up that context at the beginning. Number two, the target language is what did you see? So we're going to be using past tense verbs. The context here, I've chosen the context of travel. Okay, the travel is something we've done in the past, and the target language is related to speaking in the past. So your general context is travel. Number three, the target language, this is cheaper than that. So it's comparative, and a context for this is shopping. Often when we are comparing things, the size, the color, the price, things like that, often when we're comparing things, we do that when we're shopping. Okay, so shopping for items could be a context for this target language. Okay, sometimes the context is very easy and kind of immediate, like number one, I have a headache. The context is pretty obviously kind of doctor and hospital. But sometimes you have to kind of create a context, to create like a new extra layer to the lesson. And you can use that at the beginning, but then you can also use that later on to make the language practice more kind of more real, in a real life situation. Okay, so think about context. If you can't think of a context for your language, invent a context. Okay, create an extra layer of context for your lesson. Now, here are some examples. If you're not sure about context, some people don't quite get it at first. So here are some more examples for context. Now, if you have a look at the bottom right here, this is today's topic. Today's topic is Thanksgiving. This is an American yearly annual festival. I believe it's similar to Chuseok. Okay, so if you're teaching young learners, you might have a class about Thanksgiving, for example. Okay, now if you begin the lesson by saying, today we're going to talk about Thanksgiving, right? Maybe that doesn't really mean anything for the students, and you're going to lose their interest, right? So let's think about Thanksgiving, and let's go backwards. So if we move over to the blue box now, the general context of Thanksgiving is festivals. Thanksgiving is a type of festival. So festivals is kind of the general context in which Thanksgiving is one example. So let's think of a list of festivals. Can you make a list of festivals? Halloween, Christmas, Pepero Day, Valentine's Day, Chuseok Solal. So asking students to make, brainstorm a list of festivals is a way of introducing more context to the topic of Thanksgiving. But if we move even further backwards in the planning process, the first questions of the lesson are, how was your Chuseok this year? Where did you go? What did you eat? Now these are easy questions, should be easy to answer. Everybody knows about Chuseok in Korea, okay? So you can ask these questions and easily get some topic started, right? So if you look at the planning process of this, you start with your main topic of the lesson and you kind of go backwards in the planning, okay? That's often something we do, is we don't plan the warm-up first. Actually, we plan the warm-up last, because the warm-up leads towards the main topic. So we need to think about the main topic and those things first. Okay, so this one starts with Chuseok, which is a related context, and then goes to festivals, which is the general context, and then back down to a specific context, a new context of Thanksgiving. And then you can link, of course, Thanksgiving and Chuseok for the students as well. Okay, let's have a look at another example then. So here's an example that has a worksheet. So if you look at the bottom, today's class, a worksheet about volcanoes. So this is your main classroom content, your material. Maybe it's a reading in a textbook, for example. So you have a reading comprehension task related to volcanoes. Okay, so how do we set up the context of volcanoes? Well, again, let's go backwards in the lesson planning. So from the worksheet to volcanoes, what is a volcano that students know about? Hallasan. Okay, so Hallasan is a volcano in Korea that most Koreans are going to be aware of, right? So Hallasan is a related context for volcanoes. Now, where is Hallasan? If we go backwards, Jeju. So Jeju is an island in Korea. All Korean students are going to know about Jeju. So going back in the context, the first question is, have you been to Jeju? So your first question, have you been to Jeju? It seems like it doesn't really link with volcanoes, right? So we came to this question by creating a series of steps from our main material back to a warm-up question. So we go from Jeju to the map of Jeju, and then we talk about the map of Jeju. Oh, what do you know about Jeju? Where is Jeju City? Where have you been to? Oh, what's this in the middle of the map? Does anybody know what this is? Hallasan, Mount Hallasan. So, do you know anything about this mountain? Is it special? Let's have a look at a picture. Oh, it's got a big hole in the top. What could that be? Well, this used to be a volcano. And today we're going to learn about volcanoes. So notice how the class has led from Jeju to Hallasan and then finally to volcanoes. And hopefully you've kind of kept their interest, and you've also provided some context and some background warm-up for the students. So when they go into the reading comprehension, they have hopefully some interest and some activated background knowledge as well. Okay, so when you're starting a lesson and you're thinking about context, here are some examples that we've looked at. So tip, think about the wider topic first, or a related topic that the learner knows. And here are the two examples we looked at that has Thanksgiving and Chuseok, which are both part of the festival's context. On the other side, we've got volcanoes. Halasan is a type of volcano, and Jeju is a related context to Halasan. Okay, so Jeju is actually outside of the volcano context, but it allows us to kind of transition into volcanoes. Okay, so I hope that's given you a bit of an idea about contextualizing. It's a really, really useful way of thinking about lessons. Okay, my final tips in this video about starting a lesson. This next tip is personalize. Okay, so think about your topic, relate it to the learner. So, for example, do you remember we went to the zoo? What was your favorite animal? Okay, and that's relating a topic, a kind of animal topic to the learner. Okay, the learner went to the zoo, their favorite animal. That's personalizing. Okay, another suggestion, talk about the objective of the lesson. Talk about the outcome. You know, what is the purpose and what are students going to be able to achieve by the end of the lesson? For example, today we're going to make a poster. So a poster is an outcome. Finally, reuse and review language from previous lessons. Okay, so at the beginning of the lesson, you might want to kind of go over some of the previous content, especially if it's students that you're seeing every week regularly. You should be including review steps at the beginning of the lesson. Okay, so I hope that's given you some good ideas about starting a lesson. There's lots of different ways of starting a lesson, but there are some techniques that are really useful that generally seem to work. So think about using multimedia, easy questions, getting students involved quickly, getting their attention with visuals and things like cartoons and celebrities. And also, really important, think about setting the context at the beginning of the lesson. Okay, I hope that was useful. Thank you very much.